Hello everyone and welcome to this video. My name is Miss Huda and I teach Java programming. In this video I will talk to you about exception handling. Exception handling is trying to avoid runtime errors. Runtime errors are different than syntax errors. When the compiler sees a syntax error, it displays a message saying that something is missing. For example, if you remove this semicolon, you will find here a syntax error saying semicolon expected. However, runtime errors are different. Runtime errors happen when there is something wrong while running your program. So nothing is wrong when you are compiling, but when you are running, you find that your application crashes and an exception is thrown. In this code, I have 4 different parts of code. Each part will produce a certain runtime error. So let's take one part by one part and see how to fix this part. So the first part, we have an array of strings that has 6 strings in it, and we are trying to display this array element by element. So let's run this code and see what will happen. When we run this code, we will get an array index out of bounds exception, meaning that you went outside the bounds of the array. So if you add try and here close the try and then type catch and then array index out of bounds exception, and let's call the exception EX. Here we can display the message you went outside the limits of the array. And also you could display the message that is coming with the exception object. So exception dot get message. So let's try this code now and see what will happen. So you have displayed elements as 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then when the code tried to access the array at position 6, it generated the exception, but the exception did not crash the program, and it went to the catch part and it said you went outside the limits of the array, and the position that caused this crash was the position 6. So this is for part number 1. Let's go to part number 2. So what this code is going to do is going to use the parse double method to convert from a string to a double. So let's try to run this code and we get the number format exception. This is because it could not convert this number correctly. We should add a try bracket, close the try, and then write catch and take this exception, the number format exception. I will call it E, for example, and here I will write this is not a proper double number, and I will add the E dot get message. So let's try this code now after the try and catch and run this code. The parse double tried to convert this string and it failed, so it went directly to the catch part and it displayed this is not a proper double number for the input string, this input string. Okay, so this is for the number format exception. We can try the exceptions for part 3. So let's uncomment this part. In this part I have an array of integers that has only 2 elements, 5 and 0. This is at position 0 and this is at position 1. And we have a scanner and we ask the user to input 2 values and it will read 2 numbers, I and j. Then it will try to divide the array at position I divided by the array at position j. So let's try this code and try to run this code and enter the 2 values I and j. I will give it 0 and 1. And we have here an arithmetic exception. Why do we have an arithmetic exception? Because it tried to divide array sub 0, which is 5, divided by array sub 1, which is 0. So divide by 0 will get me an arithmetic exception. So what should I do? I should add a try and close the try, and then I add the catch and I get the exception. So it is an arithmetic exception. and I will call it E1, and here I will display the message division by 0 is not allowed. So let's try and run this code and see what happens. When we run, I will give it 0 and 1, and gracefully it says division by 0 is not allowed. So this exception was caught, but I can also crash this code again. So if, for example, if I run this code and it says give me two values for I and j, I will give it, for example, 4 and 5. It crashes again with an array index out of bounds exception. Why? Because I is 4 and there is no array sub 4. So array has two elements only, 0 and 1. When you try to go to array sub 4 or array sub 5, then you went outside the bounds of the array. So what can we do here? We can add another catch. So catch, for the same try, I will add another catch, array index out of bounds exception. I will call it E2, and I will add a system.out. You went outside the bounds of the array, and I will add the E2.get message. So now if I try the two values 4 and 5, then the error will be generated and you will go directly to the array index out of bound exception and you will get the message you went outside the bounds of the array. Okay, so one more time I can crash this code by giving it a letter instead of a number. It is expecting a number, it is expecting to read an integer number, and I will give it a letter instead of this number, and it will give me an input mismatch exception. So what do? We add a third catch. So we add here another catch for the input mismatch exception, and here I will write the message an integer is expected, and then I will add the E3.get message. So let's try again and run, and I'll give it an A. An integer is expected. What we are trying to do is trying to avoid the crashing of this code and catching the errors before they crash your application. So let's go to the last piece of code. Let's go to this part and try to run this code, and we have a file not found exception. Why? Because data.txt is not in my project. Although I have here the throws file not found exception, this did not stop my program from crashing. So what do? I add a try and close the try and add a catch for the file not found exception, and I call it E1, and I'll write the message this file is not found, and I can add E1.get message. When I try again, then nothing will crash and I will see this file is not found. So now I have created the file data.in, and I will try to read from this file an integer. But this file, the data.in file, does not have an integer, it has a string. So it will try to read and it will not succeed. So when I try, it will say input mismatch exception, which means that the file was found, but I could not read an integer. So what do? We add a catch. We report this error by saying integer expected, and when we run again, it will run without crashing. So the purpose of this try and catch is to prevent your program from producing exceptions and crashing with runtime errors. That's all for this video. Thank you for listening.